I'm not hearing anybody talking. Is it only me or everybody? I'm only seeing the slides.
I was requested by group members to share the slides so they can present. So we are waiting for them to present. Rasul, are you there?
Yes, good morning, members.
So Rasul, the team has 20 minutes to present, and then we use 10 minutes for discussion. So like, let's make sure we spend like 30 minutes per group.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, good morning, members, once again. Our work is research variables and the measurement of variables. So the group 2 members are Nambi Ruth, Asik Rasul, Nachigude Dorin. The 4th member is Kamukama Bernard. So our learning objectives are: 1 is we want to see the definition of variables. 2 is identifying important variables. 3 is use of research variables. 4 is the types of research variables. 5 is scales of measurements. 6 is reliability and validity. Next slide, please. So yes, members, as I've said, our work is research variables. We are first beginning with defining what a variable is. So a variable is anything that can take 2 or more values. For example, like you may be given an answer, a task to perform, and that task will give you like 2, a positive maybe and a negative. So as we move forward, qualitative research places a great emphasis on variables, because the main quantitative research is to examine the relationship between 2 or more variables. So since we say the qualitative research places a great emphasis, we are saying that it will measure the relationship between 2 or more variables, since it's talking about what? Quantitative. Therefore, once the research identifies a research topic, the next step is to identify the key variables in the study. So without identifying these variables, you find you may not go further to what? You may not go further to do anything. So they are the key. So the best way is to read the studies that are similar to your chosen study once you analyze the different types of variable identified by other researchers, meaning you're borrowing it briefly from other people, how they have worked on, and it will also guide you. So by this last slide is what briefly it is meaning. Yes, Derek, next. So as we continue, variables are things you measure. When you're measuring, of course, you're finding out in terms of quantity. You can manipulate and also control in statistics and research. So as you do your research, you'll be measuring, and sometimes you manipulate to give you the results you wish to have, and also maybe have a control, like when you're having something like you feel like to study in terms of population or the sample you're studying, you find you will have a control, and when you have control, it also at the end have an impact in it, and it will have an impact as in terms of your results. So meaning all those that you measure, you manipulate and control have an impact in your results of the research. So all studies analyzes a variable which can describe a person, a place, thing, or idea. So these are some of the few examples of a variable that somebody can study. So a variable's value can change between groups or over time. For example, if a variable is an experiment, is an experiment is a person's eye. The person's eye color, its values can change from brown to blue, from blue to green, from one person to other. So you cannot find the same. You cannot find the same what? The same color of the eye. You may find somebody has like yellow eyes, as it has been said here. Also, it varies from one person to another. So those makes your what? Your variables different. Yes, Derek. Next slide. So identifying the most appropriate variable is important for multiple reasons. Because if you don't get well, you'll end up getting false results. So one, variables provide focus to the study. So meaning you'll be emphasizing particularly on the variable you've identified. If it is means like you're doing a research on adolescents, specifically you'll be focusing on adolescents, and you dig more to build up your research to be able to come with an accurate result. So if you pick the wrong ones, the findings of the study may go in a direction. As I said, if you pick like your study is talking about youth and you end up picking adults, in that you'll come up with the wrong what purpose of the study. So it is also important to focus on the methods, as we have said here, as you have seen in the morning here. The method you'll be using will also help you. Like when you take an example of the programmatic, which will require you to do an action research. So if you don't identify those variables, meaning you'll have also challenge in identifying some of those things. And also the tools for measuring the selective variables. We shall go further and see what do you use when you want to measure, or what do you get when you want to use this variable? What do you get? So picking the wrong ones may also take the findings into an intended direction. That is in relation to an example would be the one I said before, where you feel your study should focus on the youths, but you've picked your sample as the elder, so you will get a wrong what? A wrong purpose of the study. So variables can also be useful when you are searching for other studies. For example, in a journal article that are similar to yours. That's why I said earlier on, you'll maybe go into someone's research to find out what are those variables the person used to guide you also, so that you'll not go astray. So thus the variables can serve as such terms. So that is briefly why you need to identify, or if you don't identify variables very well, what will it lead you? And if you identify very well, how will it help you out of the research you're doing? Derek, let's move to the next slide, please. So we said uses of variables in research. When you don't have variables, I believe surely you will not have a good what? A good research outcome. Researchers and statisticians uses variables to describe and measure the items. You can measure items. That's why at first we were saying qualitative, quantitative. You measure items, places, people, or ideas they are studying. So that's why I said earlier on that you need to measure. If it means identifying something, like in terms of color, we talked of the colors of people, in terms of maybe the eyes, the colors varying from here and there. So it will help them in studying those. So many types of variables exist, and you must choose the right variables to measure when designing studies. Of course, as I said earlier on, there are so many types of variables which with later we will see. And you also select tests. You also need to prove and see that whatever variable I've selected, will it be of important when I use to conduct this research, or when I use it to conduct these studies, and also interpreting the results. So as a wrong understanding of variable can lead to more accurate statistical analysis and results. So as I said earlier on, when you pick a wrong variable, it will lead you into a wrong results, which will not serve the intended purpose of the study. You first go to the previous one. Yes, research variable types. Here we are looking at the types now. We said, yes, please.
Yes, can you let another person take over because of time?
Okay. So any member in group 2 have been requested that let somebody come and take over, please. Is there anyone? If there's no one, then I continue.
No, I'm available.
Okay.
Okay, we are looking at the research variables. There are two types of variables, mainly the independent and the dependent. The independent variable is what you are testing, and the dependent variable is the result. Just as we are seeing at the independent variable, most time we refer to the independent variables and the cause. Most experiments also include a controlled variable. We go to the next slide. Like I've said, that the independent variable we refer to it as the predictor, because to predict the change on the dependent variables. In conducting research, in research studies, researchers observe how the dependent variables change as the independent variable changes. In an experimental study, the researcher controls or manipulates the independent variable to see how this affects or does not affect the dependent variable. We go to the next slide. An example we can give is like an independent variable is a singular characteristic that the other variables in an experiment cannot change. An example is age of a dependent. An example, age as an example of an independent variable, where someone lives, what they eat, and how much they exercise are not going to change their age. Meaning age is not dependent on what someone eats or where someone lives. So in this example, age is an independent variable. We go to another slide. We are looking at the dependent variable. Dependent variable, just as the word says depend, they always rely on other components, and they can change depending on other variables. The dependent variables, or we'll look at them as the outcome, the predicted, or even what is caused, because they are always influenced by other variables. For example, yes, we are looking at that independent variables can influence dependent variables, but dependent variables cannot influence the independent variables. For example, the time you spend studying is dependent, can affect the grade on your can affect the grade on your test. But the grade on your test does not affect the time you spend studying. Do we understand this?
No.
Like that your grade are dependent on the time you spend studying. Your grade in a test are dependent on the time you spend studying, meaning that the time you spend studying is a dependent variable here. Is the time you spend studying is a dependent variable.
I think maybe the way I've understood it, looking at the time you spend studying alone, we are looking at as an independent variable, because you have to study, put in time, go to school, or that. Then the outcome of it is how you perform. What is he referring to as the independent? I mean a dependent variable. So it's looking at when you go to school, study, concentrate, that will affect the outcome, which is the performance. I don't know whether I've got it right.
Yes. Yeah, you've got it right. But your test results will not affect the time you spend studying. Which means that your results are dependent on the time you're spending studying, but not the time you spend studying, depending on your what? On your results. Hope I'm clear there. On the next slide, we see there are other variables, but the independent and the dependent are the main variables. But there are also other variables that will affect our research, or the researchers often use. For example, we have the intervening variables. An intervening variable is sometimes called a modulator, and is a theoretical variable that the researcher uses to explain a cause or a connection between other study variables, usually the dependent and the independent variable. The intervening variables are associations. They are associations instead of observations. For example, if wealth is an independent variable, and a long lifespan is a dependent variable, the researcher might hypothesize that access to quality healthcare is an intervening variable that links wealth and lifespan, which is true. We believe that might hypothesize that people who are wealthy, they have access to quality healthcare, and hence they have a very long lifespan. We can go to the next slide. Modulating variables, or the modulator variable, can change the relationship between the dependent and the independent variables by strengthening or weakening the intervening variables effect. For example, in a study looking for the relationship between the economic status, having the economic status as the independent variable, and how frequently people get physical examination from doctors as our dependent variable, age is a modulating variable. The relationship might be weaker in young individuals and stronger in older individuals. Reason being, if people look at people who have good economic status, we believe as people grow older, they are prone to very many they are prone to very many non-communicable diseases. So expect these people to often go for medical checkup then we look at people who look at the what then we look at what the young ones who are already physically fit. They may not require to often go and get a physical checkup from the doctor. So age can be a modulator, changing the relationship between our independent variable and the dependent variable. Then we go to the next slide. We look at the control variables. The controlling variables are characteristics that are constant and do not change during a study. These ones are majorly used in experimental research, where we can subject some of our, where some of the samples in the study are subject to certain conditions and others are not. So the ones which are not subjected, the subjects that are not exposed, we call them the control of the experiment. For example, in an experiment about plant development, control variables might include the amount of fertilizers and water each plant gets. These amounts are always the same, so they do not affect the plant's growth. Researchers might intentionally keep control variables at the same throughout an experiment to prevent bias. Yeah, but why we carry out this, why we use control variables is to prevent bias. And we can go to the next slide. Where we have the extraneous variables. Extraneous variables are factors that affect the dependent variable, but the researcher did not originally consider when designing the experiment. We are going to take an example for the study, assessing whether private tutoring or online courses are more effective at improving students' scores. An support prior knowledge of the foreign language or social.
You are very low. I can't hear you now.
Okay, how about here?
It's okay.
I'm giving I was discussing the example that these extraneous variables can affect the outcome of the study, but the researcher might have ignored them. For example, assessing students, online students, their test scores might be influenced by prior knowledge, parental support, and you might get wrong information, but you ignore this because of this other variable, which is the extraneous variables.
Excuse me, Doreen. You can stop there for the sake of time, then another person takes over. Thank you.
Let me discuss the co-founding, then she's going to come after this.
Okay.
Then we are having another variable, which is the confounding. And the confounding is a variable you did not account for that disguises into another variable and can affect the result. An example is that if you are in a study discussing the relationship between the level of exercise, which is an independent variable, and the body mass index as the dependent variable, but you do not consider the age's effect on the factor. So the age can become our confounding because it is going to affect the results, but unless you test this confounding, you might get wrong results. Because the confounding variable always change the results. Thank you very much. Ruth can take over.
Hello, Ruth. There.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, good morning, class. My name is Ruth. My voice is a bit low because I have a bradycardia. I'll start with scales of measurement. And this can be defined as, can be used to quantify or categorize variables. And these scales are unknown attributes that measure a particular entity, and they can take one or more values. As we see in the pictorial, we have nominal, ordinal, and interval and ratio scales. They are grouped in various types of data. Derek, you may please scroll down. I'm using another screen here. We have, they are grouped into two categories, where we have quantitative and qualitative. On the side of quantitative, we have the data that can be measured with numbers, such as duration or speed. And we made emphasis on the continuous, qualitative continuous, where these numbers can be broken down, such as height or weight. And here we see, this is where interval and ratio scales fall. So on the interval scales, we have numbers with differences between the variables. These numbers are known with differences, such as time. And on the ratio scale, we have numbers that have measurable intervals, where differences can be determined, such as height or weight. So on the qualitative side, we have the non-numerical data that is categorical, such as yes, and this can be responses, yes or no, or eye color, like Rasul had discussed above in the variables. So under the qualitative, we have nominal and ordinal. Yet for the quantitative continuous, we have interval and ratio. So for the nominal, the data is used for naming variables, such as the hair color, such as maybe the gender, and the ordinal data is used to describe the order of values, such as 1, 2, 3. That will be maybe someone did not smile, or smiled, or never smiled. Here we have an example of happy, neutral, or unhappy. So someone can use numerics to describe these variables. Next slide. The next slide down explains these variables in details, these scales of measurement in details, where you have the nominal scale, the scale which represents names. Excuse me, Mr. Ijalu. Hello. Derek.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm running out of breath, so I wish to stop here because
Okay, let
I
me
have a bradycardia.
take over. Sorry.
Please go ahead and continue and finish.
She's having a health challenge.
I cannot continue because I have an arrhythmia. I cannot, I'm gathering more breath. So I wish to stop here, sir.
Yes, Derek.
Yes, please.
I think I can come on board because he's not feeling well. So if Bernard is there, let him take over. If not, then I come back.
All right. Let me take over from where Ruth. You can use this measure. You can take a scale of naming without any order, formula. For example, if we are talking about, we can talk about gender, we say male or female. An example of an ordinal scale. And when we look at the ordinal scale possesses possesses a quality of magnitude. It is the ordinal scale, or it's like from that ordinal, it takes an order when doing things. For example, if you're talking how good something is, it can be from good, better, best, or can even say excellent, extremely good. It takes that order. That's the ordinal scale. An example you can give. Then when we look at the interval scale, just as Ruth has been discussing, the interval scale it indicates the rate in which things are named numerically with equal distances between the responses. For example, if you look at ranges like we use intervals for height, we can say because height is ranging between 20 to 25 centimeters.
Breaking. I don't know that is only my network. Derek, can someone support her? Like we can hardly get her. Maybe someone picks from there because now we really can't pick her.
Darren, your network is not good. Maybe someone can take from the same group. I don't know about the time.
Yes, he was talking about interval scale. And she started saying it is a scale in which the objects are rated. Meaning they're rated in terms of numbers and as you rate them, meaning it will have like values that are in form of numbers. But as you said, it will not have it has no absolute zero, meaning it will begin from where? I mean from somewhere, since it's a what? It's an interval and it's a numerical. An example here is like for example, somebody's weights. Of course, when you're still standing on the weighing scale, you find start at zero, but as soon as you've put a leg, it moves forward. So that is briefly an example about it. So the fourth one is the ratio scale. It is the height scale that allows the researcher to identify the objects, assign a rank or order to the objects, and compare the difference or the intervals. Meaning here you'll be having like in form of sequence those numbers, and meaning you need to arrange and compare and get out the differences. And this was that the ratio scale possesses all the three qualities mentioned above, right from nominal, from ordinal, and interval. So it comprises all, and it has a magnitude. Next slide, please, Derek. So the four scales have been like summarized for us here, as we saw above. The nominal, of course, is used for naming variables in no particular order. For example, the use of the eye that we earlier on talked about, maybe somebody's skin color, all those applies in nominal scale. Ordinal, of course, you said it's used in a ranked order, but differences between is not determined. For example, unhappy, neutral, and so on. So those ones, you find you'll not realize the difference so much. We have the interval scale used for numerical, as we said earlier on, for non or equal intervals of the same distance. For example, time. A ratio scale used for variables on a scale that have measurable interval. For example, weight. Yes, direct to the next slide. So this slide basically summarizes the four scales of measurement. So we're looking at the reliability and validity. Reliability and validity about how well a method measures something. As earlier on we said, the method you're going to what? The method you're going to use, it will help you to get the type of the research you're supposed to perform, as we saw above. So we say the reliability refers to the consistency of the measure of a measure, where the results can be reproduced under the same conditions. And validity, we said it refers to the accuracy of a measure, whether the results really do represents what they are supposed to measure. An example here may be like you have what? Like you've got your samples and you want to prove whether these samples have really brought what you're supposed to get. Or if somebody uses the same samples to do exactly, will it bring exactly what that person has done it before? So that is the meaning of what? Validity. Next slide, please, Derek. So in summary, we are saying a variable is a characteristics or a quantity of a phenomenon that can be measured or classified. So the values of variables can change over time or across units. And also it may depend from one person to another, depending on the intent of the study or the purpose of the study. Variables are important to qualitative research because this type of research focuses on explaining the relationship between variables. And the variables play a key role in the selection of the methods. As we said earlier on, they go hand in hand. You have applied this method, you need to go with this type of variables and the tools in the study, and thus influences the results of the study. So as we earlier on said that the method and the variables, the methods will help you use this type of variables, and that later they will also have the influence of the results of the study. So meaning if you have not done the right selection of the variables and also the right selection of the method of the research you want to do, meaning they are going to directly affect your results, which will not give you the exact purpose or the intent of what you're going to study. Next slide, please. So when choosing variables, the best way is to conduct a literature review and see what variables have been used in a similar studies. As we said earlier on, you can borrow somebody's maybe research and find out the variables this person has used, which will also help you. So you review what people have worked on about such particular study. Where this is not possible, researchers may find it useful to pretest, meaning you'll be required to do a pretest about the choices of the variables you'll make in the study, so that you're able to get the expected results of the study. So it is also advisable to use multiple variables to measure the same concept. This helps the researcher to identify which variables are the most appropriate fit, and can also help to ensure that the concept being measured is measured completely. So variables are of two types, as we said earlier on, independent and dependent and what? And dependent variables. And to check on the accuracy of their variables, researchers test the reliability and validity of their variables. As we said earlier on, you need to confirm by asking so many questions. If you use this, will they lead you to this? So scales of measurements of variables are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, as we discussed above. Next, please, Derek. So these are briefly the references where we got this work from, which can be used at appropriate time. And thank you for listening. So if there's a questions or clarifications,
research, we're dealing with measurement. We are dealing with measurement, and so we should know what we are going to measure and how we are going to measure it. We also know that in research we are looking out for relationships. We're looking out for associations. We're answering questions, and so variables help us, and so we measure these variables, and the group has explained to us all. Key for us to note is we must know what a dependent variable, independent variable, confounding variable, modulator variable. Because all your life in academia, as long as you're going to study any other course, research, it will be based on the variables. And you're going to hear the same things over and over about the variables. So thank you so much for an elaborate discussion. I think that members have taken note of it. So we will take on group 4. Group 3 will come later. We shall take on group 4 that will come and talk about the research designs. So we can as well again take you can load group 4. You can load on the slides. I'm assuming that you're going to talk about the research designs. So as you're preparing, we can take a break. Let's take a 15-minute break. And then we resume at 10 minutes past midday. So group 4, other groups, please, if you know that you're not able to share your work in advance with Derek, other than waiting for the time of the presentation and then you start fidgeting. A little bit kind of being organized. So let me give you a preamble to what is the prevalence of COVID-19 among Ugandan students. Just to give a picture that is descriptive, trying to tell the world that yes, this is what we have. Then it can take an analytic form where we are now going to ask, what are the factors that are associated with this condition? So descriptive, we just want to show the world this is how it is appearing. In analytic, we want to look at the relationships of the association between the factors that could explain this condition. Now, diagnostic takes the pragmatic approach of how good is test Q in detecting condition Z, or how good is gene expert in testing for COVID. So that's the diagnostic approach. So, and the outcome. And it takes those that cause the outcome. So we have the outcome, which is our dependent variable, either conditions, death, whatever, something that can result from the independent variables. So in this particular case, we are looking at from the issue of the design, we're looking at how do we design our study such that we look out for these two things. Either we're looking out for exposure, we're looking out for the outcome, or we're looking out for both. And so before we select a design, we first want to know, is this design going to help us to answer our question? Is it relevant to our question? Is it feasible? Is it simple to do before we go ahead or not? So variables, consider quite a number of them. So in research, there are two types of research in health systems or health services research and general research. The research can either be a non-interventional research or an interventional design. In a non-interventional, you're not doing anything. You're not putting any intervention. You are just observing what is happening. And that's why it is also called an observational study. You just observe and analyze situations as they appear without intervening. Like you go to a community, you want to study factors affecting malaria, you just go and ask people questions, you come back. But you're not going to distribute mosquito nets, give them treatment, or even help to educate them. No, you're not putting an intervention. So in that case, we call it a non-interventional research or observational research. And then we can have now the research design where we're putting an intervention. This one where we're putting an intervention, we call it a non-observational or an experimental study. So here we want to manipulate the variables, manipulate the independent variables or manipulate the outcome. We manipulate the independent variables and then we keep on measuring the effect on the outcome. So in the simple times, under non-intervention, we can either go and do exploratory, descriptive, or analytic studies, like we explained in the last lecture. Then interventional study, we're either going to do experimental studies or quasi-experimental studies, and then pre or post-experimental studies. So when we break down these designs, we can have observational designs. These are just examples where you have the cohort, case report, case control, cross-sectional studies. The experimental designs, one of them is the randomized controlled studies or trials, randomized controlled trials, or the quasi-experimental studies. Those are experimental designs, or we also call them interventional study designs. Now, in observational studies, there is no intervention. That one I've stated. No intervention, and then we don't control control the environment. Just go observe and report. And so these observational studies can either be exploratory studies, where we just go to the community to explore, like the other boys who came to the Nile, the joint speaker and research, Richard Barton, just coming to explore, find out what is happening in a situation where little is known. When COVID-19 came, we didn't know much about COVID. So people went to do exploratory studies to explore, understand more about COVID. The other forms of studies are qualitative, descriptive. These ones go paint a picture. I'm taking you back to where we discussed, just painting a picture to what we can see from either socioeconomic, cultural, whatever behaviors that we are going to see. Then comparative, we'll call them analytical studies. These ones, you want to look at attempts to establish the risks or the associations between dependent and independent variables. So I'm going to skip these other slides because this is what the team is coming to discuss for us. So I want to talk about experimental studies. So I've said experimental studies, we cover either fully experimental studies and then the quasi-experimental studies. In these experimental studies, we want to randomly allocate participants to two different groups. One group we give the intervention, another group we don't give the intervention. Then eventually at the end of it all, we come and compare. So if we want to test whether the drug is working very well, if a company has produced a new drug and they want to know whether, let's say they are producing a new drug for malaria, first line management of malaria. So we have Coatem as our first line management. So in this case, we bring a new drug, get patients who have malaria. One group you give the new drug, another group you maintain them on the standard of care, that is the Coatem. Then at the end of it all, we analyze and find out in which group did we have fast recoveries or number of deaths. So when we find that the new drug, people recover very well without any side effects, then we can say that the new drug is working much better than the old drug. So in this kind of study, we are doing random assignment of participants. In the quasi-experimental study, there is no random assignment of participants. But we are just trying also to establish cause-effect relationship. So in this case, what we are studying is effectiveness. In the experimental studies, we are looking at efficacy. In the quasi-experimental, we are looking at effectiveness, whereby we want to see how does the outcome play about with the independent variables in a non-controlled environment. So we are not manipulating variables, but instead we want to see whether the outcome will change in a non-controlled environment. Okay, so that's a brief preamble that I want to give to the class before we can now welcome the other groups to come and share with us what they have. I submit to you group 4.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaru, for the brief introduction. It has been so informative. We have learned a lot. Group 4 have not yet received your work. I don't know why you sent it. I've checked on the email, it's not there.
Derek, I'll send it on your email, please.
On my personal email or student's email? Godfrey.
I think your personal email.
Maybe we can have group 3 present meanwhile.
Thank you, Derek. I think Bruce, you can take over. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, members.
Good afternoon.
We are supposed to research about quantitative study designs. So our objectives, we are going to look at the definition. We are going to look at the characteristics of quantitative research. We also look at some examples. Then the methods and types, we also look at the advantages. Next slide. So quantitative research, it's a systematic investigation of phenomena by gathering quantifiable data and performing statistical, mathematical, and computation techniques. So me, what I understood about this research, it's like we are dealing with numbers, figures. We don't do like, yeah, okay. We are we are dealing with numbers. That's all. So here, it's a collection of information from existing and potential customers using sampling methods and sending out online surveys, online polls, questionnaires, and the results can be duplicated in the form of numerical form. So we get a topic that we are going to research about. We form questions, then we distribute them to the sample, to the population that we are going to sample. So the results we get, we compute them. We get statistical data from the findings we've gotten. Next slide, Derek. So on the characteristics, we are going to look at what we need to have in order to do it, in order to do a quantitative research, what we are supposed to be having. We are going to look at structured tools. Structured tools can be surveys, they can be tools, they can be questionnaires that are going to help us gather the data. Then we are also going to look at the sample size. We must have a sample size. Like in any research, you have to choose a sample size. The people you're going to the people that are going to help you get the information you want. Then the next thing we are going to have closed-end questions. Our questionnaires are going to be having closed-end questions. Like we don't ask these questions where the respondents are supposed to write a lot of words. We ask simple questions, yes or no, like that. Next slide. Then the other characteristic is, Eric.
We're already on the next slide, dear. Maybe it's
we must do prior studies. Various factors related to the research topics are studied before collecting feedback from the respondents. You as a researcher, you must first do like your own investigation about what you want to research about. Pardon? Then we also have quantitative data. Quantitative data is, we represent this quantitative data in form of tables, we get charts, graphs, like those numbers, we represent them in two figures. Then we also have generalization of results. The results of this research method can be generalized .
Hello, Prof.
Sister, you can take over if the network is not.
Seems our network is disturbing. So thank you, Prof. A generalization of results. A results of this research method can be generalized to an entire population to take appropriate actions for improvement. In other words, we cannot take the whole population as the sample, so we just pick on the target the sample from the target population. So after our research, then we generalize or we draw a conclusion. Next slide, Derek. So we also have some examples of quantitative research. For example, survey conducted to understand the amount of time a doctor takes to tend to a patient when the patient walks into the hospital health facility. So we have already looked in the previous slides at the type of questionnaires we have to use, the characteristics, for example, those with close-ended questions. So in other words, when it comes to this, we just have to form our questions in a way that like, when did you walk in? Is it an hour ago or 30 minutes ago? So that we don't complicate life for our respondents. Then also, if any organization would like to conduct a customer satisfaction, that is a survey, a customer satisfaction survey template can be used. These ones are also used in our health setting, in our health facilities, when we want to know more about how our services, whether they are pleasant or they're not pleasant to our clients. Those are the patients or people who come to our health facilities. Then also an organization that conducts an event, collecting feedback from the event.
Just a second, Uncle, could you also send me the slides on my mail? I'll send you on the chat. Send me the slides on my email. I'll post it in the chat, my email address.
An organization that conducts an event, collecting feedback from the event attendees about the value that they see from the event using an event survey template to collect actionable feedback about satisfaction levels of customers during various phases of the event. For example, when we have parties, there's what we call an evaluation committee sits after the party or after any event to evaluate, such that in case the next time the same thing is done, it's done better. Next slide, please. Derek, can we move on the next slide?
We're already on next slide, dear.
No, next, we are through with that one. We are through with the examples, in others. So another one is survey conducted to understand the amount. No, we finished that one, Derek. Can we move on, please? Hello, Derek.
Yes, please. Where exactly do you want
Let's move on.
Our slides are moving. It's just that maybe your network.
Or it's my network.
Yeah.
I don't know even where I've reached, whether I'm very far or I'm too
deep. Let's go backward, please. Sorry, I think it's my network. Let's go backwards, Derek, please.
Okay, dear. You tell me where to stop.
Yeah, you first move backwards.
Up to where? Up to here.
Up to there.
Yes.
Now we are on let's go on the best practices to conduct our quantitative research. So here we have to differentiate, to be able to differentiate between quantitative and qualitative. Understand the difference between the two methodologies and apply the one that suits your needs best. For example, we have been looking at the types of variables. So we have to know which one is ordinal, which one is nominal, and which one applies better, which one is ratio and interval, and which one suits our quantitative. So for the case of quantitative, we usually use intervals and ratios. So also choose a suitable example, a sample size. Ensure that you have a sample representative of your population and large enough to be statistically weighty. In other words, if we are to come up with accurate data, we have to come up with a sample size large enough to give us, in order to avoid the errors in our research. Then also keep your research goals clear and concise. Know your research goals before you begin data collection to ensure you collect the right amount and the right quantity of data. In other words, we don't need to begin on a research topic and then on the way we see things are not coming out and then we switch to another thing. What do we mean here? So in other words, should from the start, just as we said, one of the characteristics was in other words, we should do our baseline survey first or prior investigations before we begin on a research. And then also keep the questions simple. That one we have already finished it. We should not make life for our respondents hard by bringing those lengthy questions like what do you think? Such questions which are open ended questions. In other words, they should be close-ended, simple and precise to the point, which will involve answers like yes or no. How old are you? Are you a female or male? Something like that. Next slide, please. No, we are there. So methods, we are on the methods and types. There are two methods to conduct quantitative research. These include primary quantitative research methods and secondary. In primary, hello? Hello?
Yeah, I have a suggestion that I think we can hold on there. Yes, because sir. At least you've given us the gist of what quantitative research holds, you know.
Yes, sir.
Why we do the quantitative research, and then how this is done, why and how this is done. Yes, and sir. So that I think that is sufficient for us to know. That is sufficient for us to know. At this time, I would also first now welcome the qualitative research so that we're able to appreciate the differences between what you've explained in terms of quantitative and then qualitative. So I think let's welcome the people who are coming to give us the qualitative research, also give us the gist of what qualitative is, and then we can now merge the two and talk about the designs actually.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Is it group 3?
The group 3.
Okay, plus.
Derek, please help us share. I can share.
And please also send me your slides. Group 3, send me your slides.
Yes, I have your slides. Someone saying is going to share?
Yeah, please, Derek, help. Please share. I don't have the rate.
Is this the final copy that you sent me?
Yeah, that is the final copy. Thank you. Thank you, members. This is group 3. We are 4 members: Ochama Peter, Bamleke Eston, Nanyange Press Lydia, and Chalimpa Jennifer. We are going to discuss qualitative research, and Ochama Peter is going to take us through the first slides.
Meanwhile, you forward the slides to me on mail.
Let me forward. Ochama? Yes, please present. Yes.
Proceed, please. The slide.
Up to where, sir?
The first slide before that one. Ochama, you can start.
What is happening?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is group 3. We have the topics of qualitative research designs, like in slide 3. We have that group. Let me go to the next slide, slide 4. Slide 4. So under qualitative, we have that kind of photographs. When you look at that photographs, people will have different interpretations. May I ask Eston to tell me what he sees there? Eston, what do you see there?
Yeah, I can see a woman carrying potatoes on her head.
And what do you think Derek will say? Derek, what do you say about that photograph?
A lady holding her cheek.
Holding a hat. So when you look at now Eston's results and also Derek's observations, you see that photos is a photo of a lady. He has a black hair. She has also, she's covering herself with a veil. And then there's a say cloth, this black one woolen, she's putting on. So everybody has his own observations or his own understanding. And that's what we are looking at, qualitative analysis. Can we go to the next slide, 5? In group 5, we said here, at the heart of qualitative research, it's that
the network is not stable. Your network is not stable.
Differently, according to their own experience, interest, understanding, different. So that is what the heart of qualitative research is all about how people. Hello, Paul? Paul, I think your network is not clear.
Peter, you can continue. Your
Okay,
network
I'm
wasn't
getting you
clear
now.
previously, but now it's okay. You can continue.
You can continue.
I can hear you very well, but you're. We go to slide. So when you come to slide 6, We look at now the introductory part of the qualitative research. We said qualitative research is a powerful tool for learning more about our lives, socio-historical context in which we live. And that one, according to Merriam and Associates in 2002. That's what they saw in the qualitative research. They said it's a tool which is so powerful in learning more about our lives, socio-historical context, and in the life that we normally go through every day. What did Patton say? Patton says qualitative inquiry cultivates the most useful of all human capacities, the capacity to learn from others. So when you look at now in one of the points that shall be discussing in the focal group discussions, you're going to learn from these people who are going to put in the members, the participants. You get more different views, different observations, different understanding from them that they will be giving. And that is what we're looking at in the qualitative research designs. As we go through groups, slide number 7. Slide number 7. Slide 7, we are now looking at the qualitative research designs. What is it? Group 3, they say qualitative research is exploratory or interrogative research and tries to get under the surface. You try to look at, you want to unearth the blanket, you unearth the carpets, you want to see what really is down there, not really just like counting. As in our first slides, we said in under qualitative research, not at everything that counts, really there need to be counted. There are so many other things that we cannot count, and they so matters to us. When you look at the second things, we look at the aims. The aim is to gather insights into how people live, what they do, how they use things, or what they need in their everyday or professional lives. That is according to the Government Design Service, Milo in 2016. That's what they're looking at, the quality, or what is the value, or why should somebody look at that, the goal of qualitative research. We said we have to gather insights in depth. Actually, all what we are trying to introduce here, we are going to discuss it into details in other following slides. And the last slides as I'll be sharing to the next person. Number 8, slide 8. Slide 8, we're looking at the qualitative research, and we're still continuing. When you look at qualitative in data forms, how is it? We say it is conceptual, population coverage, we look at the context specifically, and then population involvement. We say it is active, it's not passive. This is where we're looking at different other forms of collecting data, whereby we say that other ways you can be using other, having a focus group discussioning, interviewing, people will be asked, it is an active performance. How are conclusions drawn? Inference methodology, and we say it is inductive. Qualitative is always inductive in nature, and the question type is open-ended, meaning focused. We have a guided question will be developed, and we want in-depth sampling. And we say the sampling method is theoretical, data collection methods, interviews, focus groups, observations. Those are what we are talking about qualitative research. If you talk about qualitative research, those are the things what are type data, your data collections, groups, observations, analytical methods, it's more of descriptions and interpretations. You remember the photo I asked Estons and Derek, they have to interpret them, and my interpretations was totally different. And in Ragas, we said it's based on a range of measures which Mr. David has been talking about, whereby in the measurements we have different things that we look through. Let's take us to slide number 9. Slide number 9, we have the qualitative research designs. In those qualitative research designs, we have different designs that we can use. We have grounded theory studies, we have case studies, we have historical studies, action research studies, phenomenological studies, and ethnographic studies. All these are the things we are going to look at into details. That gives me to Esther. Esther, can you
Before
go
you
to
go,
slide
someone
number
has
10?
a question here saying, what do you mean by conceptual data?
Yes, you're breaking.
Someone has a question here. What do you mean by conceptual data?
Hi. What do I mean by?
Conceptual data. You can check in
Derek.
the chat. It's there. What do you mean by conceptual data? If you can't hear me, check in the chat. It's there.
Conceptual data. These are the data where you have to get from this. You will give this otherwise. You can conceptualize it. Somebody's own idea, perspective, understanding, concept. You develop, just get it from the word concept. A concept can be a way of somebody's understanding, findings. Okay, so that is the conceptual data. That's what we try to look at in this. And this from the concepts can lead us to theories or can give us what we call the policies and others. So Esther will take us through the characteristics of research designs. Esther, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. This is Eston, not Esther. It is Eston Bamleke. I will join my colleagues in presenting to you research designs in qualitative research designs. I will start with the characteristics of qualitative research designs, and one of them that it is based on soft science. By this we mean it is easily understood simply because it deals with the day-to-day concepts, and there is no mathematical data analysis that is involved. That's what we mean by soft science. It is not hard, it is easily understandable. The focus is basically complex and broad, simply because it looks at the past. When you look at when you're interviewing the community, you look at the people as a whole. You look at the social, the economical, and so it is complex, holistic, just as I've explained above. You look at the individual as a whole. You don't look at a specific aspect of life. You just look at the person holistically. Then it is subjective in a way that people's opinions may differ, but you have to be open-minded in a way that you accept people's views as they come. That's what we mean by being subjective. So this kind of research is really subjective. You don't have to be rigid. You need to exercise a lot of flexibility when carrying out this research. Then dialectic, inductive reasoning. By this we mean we basically look at drawing theories. It is not deductive, but it is inductive. It is drawing you to make coming up with theories about a certain subject, and those theories need to be tested and possibly come up with the conclusion. Yeah, basically that. Then we can move on to the next slide. We continue with the characteristics. Yes, as we said, it is aimed at developing theories. Those theories need to be tested. Shared interpretation. By this we mean people need to, like a group of researchers can be interested in those stories that the participants have shared. And when they come, when they listen to those stories, they will be interested in understanding, interpreting those stories. How can those stories be interpreted to better the community better? Then it is basically aimed at communication and observation. There is a lot of talking in this kind of research method, and it's through that talking and observation that we can draw theories and possibly come up with conclusions. The basic element of analysis are words. We use a lot of words, not mathematics, not figures. We use words. Then there is also individual interpretation. As we said before, interpretation is basically individual. You may interpret something differently, I will interpret it differently, just as we saw in the photographic illustration earlier in the first slides. And it is a unique kind of research method. Let's continue. Yeah, some of the research approaches in this kind of qualitative research, one of them is phenomenology. And its goal is to describe experiences of the community or the people as they are lived, and it examines the uniqueness of an individual's lived situation. And we say each person has his or her own reality, and reality is subjective. What do we mean by this? In this kind of study, a researcher will enlist the participants to tell stories. And when they tell these stories, we expect that these people are given open-ended questions. And these open-ended questions are intended to entice these people, the participants, to tell stories. And from those stories, we can, the researcher is able to pick out the actions based on the experience of these people. And through the stories that are being said, that are being told, this person can draw conclusions and possibly guide in future interventions, possibly even draw policies or solutions to certain problems. Let's go ahead. Yes, that one I've already answered. For example, we can, like I said, it is basically aimed at the researcher asks open-ended questions, and these questions are intended to entice people, the participants, open up, share their experiences. For example, one can ask a question, a researcher can ask a question. What was it like when there was a COVID-19 outbreak in your community? You realize that different people will have different opinions. Many people were affected economically. Like many people lost jobs and they have their own experience in that. But many people gained, especially for those who were directly involved in the COVID-19 task force, the rapid response teams, who managed to get something as some kind of an appreciation at the end of it all. For them, they benefited because they got some money. But for those who lost jobs, were pushed to the villages there to dig, probably they have a different story altogether. So that's what we mean by phenomenology. People have different experiences, and reality to you may not be reality to another person. Let's continue. So which method do we use here? We don't have a clearly defined steps simply because we need to allow for flexibility, and a researcher has to be a bit creative and flexible in the way he conducts his research. So there is no specific step in conducting this kind of research, but the sampling method we seek persons who understand the study and are willing to participate, actively expressing inner feelings freely. We describe experiences of the phenomenon, write experiences of the phenomenon, and then we observe. We can also use the audio visuals to guide in further interpretation of the information we. Data analysis, we classify and rank data. Yeah, now here we have, just like with the quantitative data, even this kind of data, we can be able to rank it. For instance, we may be forced to use words like strongly agree, not agree. Such terms can be used when we are trying to rank this kind of data. And the outcomes, we find findings described from subjective point of view. Yes, that one we've already talked about it. And the research identifies the themes. Yes, it is. We expect that a researcher comes up with conclusions or theories that need to be tested later. Structural explanation of findings is developed. Yes, these findings are intended to come up with interventions, and these interventions are supposed to guide to solve problems. Yes, we go to grounded theory. This is another approach, and the purpose of grounded theory is basically aimed at generating a theory. It develops a theory in which way? Used in discovering what problems exist in social scenes and how a person is handled them. For grounded theory, the researcher can engage the participants, and these participants can be engaged in different ways. It can be through just observing them. It can be through collecting data and analyzing that data and find out the possible cause or solutions, the possible causes and solutions. For instance, in human resource management, the human resource manager may intend to find out, why is it that my employees are coming late at work? And this human resource manager may either interview a group of them or observe them, and at the end of it all, the information that he will collect, he will analyze it and then come up with possible theories. This could be, maybe they lack accommodation nearby and they are coming from far, and that could be the cause of late coming. So this is.
I think we need to go a little bit faster because it is lunchtime. It's lunchtime, okay. So I think we could go a bit faster.
Okay, so that is the grounded theory. It is basically intended to develop theories by observing data analysis and then coming up with theories. The purpose of this is to develop a theory. And maybe we can go further. We can go to another slide. Data collection, interview, observation, review, or we can use a combination. We review records or we can combine all. Analysis, we develop concepts, we reduce, we sample from the literature, we can modify the concept and integrate. Outcomes, theory is supported by examples from the data. Basically, that has already been explained. The purpose of this kind of study is to develop theories, and those theories are aimed at solving problems. So I will end there and invite my colleague to take over, proceed to take over from there as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Eston. I'm going to take you through other qualitative approaches where we have the ethnography. With ethnography, its purpose, it's describing the culture's characteristics. So in this type of research, someone goes into to identify certain culture, looks through their beliefs, and look through what language they speak, how they relate with each other. The method that can be used to collect this data, they can be different methods as listed. For example, if you're to go and have a research, and your research, you want to know how the Karimajongs behave, then you will need to identify with them. You can't be a Muganda and easily go into the Karimajong culture. At least you need to get a tribe that is close to them so that you can get out important information from them. Another example, you can use the religion. For example, the Muslims. When you need to find out some information about Islam, you need to dress like a Muslim to veil so that you can get the real information that you're supposed to collect. During data collection, the few things to note are, you need to gain entrance to the culture, immerse yourself in the culture, acquire informants. That is, you need to get people who need to tell you more about this culture which you are going to research about. Then data can be collected through that direct observation, or you can interact directly with the subjects. It can later be analyzed, and a description of different characteristics of a certain culture can be got. Next slide. With a historical qualitative approach, in this one, we are examining the past. We are tending to understand what occurred in the past so that we can apply it in the present to anticipate a potential future effect. So in this type of research, it can help us to formulate new ideas, and we can be able to collect different data, clarify it, reliable, develop certain research questions, and later all this data can be analyzed and we can have a point of action done at a certain time. Next slide. So the last approach is the case study. This is on more to, you can tend to, you're researching, this type of research aims at describing in depth the experience of one person. It may be a family or a group or a community. So the method used, it can be direct observation or interaction with a subject. You can decide to interact per person, in a group, have a focus group discussion, and later analyze their experience on a different topic. And later the outcome is the in-depth description of that experience. So we are going to go further and look about the data collection tools in qualitative research. These include the key informant guides, the semi-structured questionnaires, and the focus group discussions. So when we are looking at this diagram, these are the different tools. We can have the semi-structured questionnaire, we can have the same in different people. We can have, they may be in, we can have online communities where we are examining, for example, a certain topic. Yeah, I think it's more self-explanatory. Next slide. So with these diagrams, we are seeing this, it is a research. Someone is having a focused group discussion on the left. Another one, we are having the in-person one-to-one. And we also have these pictures where we are having a focused group discussions. And the other one, we are using the video tape to record a certain type of interview to collect data. We may even have a recorder at hand so that we can collect more information, data, transcribe it, and analyze the data. Next slide. So in debrief, we are looking at in-depth interview, and case narrative guides as other data collection. The case narrative guide, when you're going to, for example, if you want to find out how COVID-19 affected that person, someone is going to narrate to you the story, what happened, and you may need to record the story depending on the tool you have used, or you may write down. In such a scenario, it may be hard for you to observe, to do a direct observation. It is more of what someone is going to tell you so that you correct the real data. Other tools that we can be used are the interview with the audio tape and the video tape. That one we saw it in the different picture. Then participant observation. You may go in the field, just for example, in the people of Kalere market, you want to see how the degree of hygiene in Kalere market. So you may just need to observe what they are doing. These people may be aware or not aware. They may be informed right now, I want to observe this, or you may not inform them, depending on the objective of the research.
My network, I'm not getting her. Maybe she has gone off due to network.
Yes, I think Chalimpa Jennifer can come.
Can you take over?
Yes, please, you can go to the slide 20.
Can Jennifer take over?
Yes. Yeah, reliability and validity, RIGA. What does it mean? It is the way to evaluate the quality of research. And RIGA is the way to develop confidence in the research you are collecting. So what do we do to be able to evaluate the quality of the research? You have to use the researcher's personality, involve the subject's experience, live with data collection until no new information appears. So when you are going to collect data, make sure you don't involve in your personality. Allow people to give you their views. Then we go to bracketing. What does it mean? Still, you have to put off your bias when you are collecting the data. The researcher suspends what is known about the phenomenon, keeping on an open contest. You have to give them a chance to explain or give out their views and set aside on your own preconceptions. So here, you must give people a chance. Okay, intuition, what does it mean? It means the ability to understand something without the need for conscious reasoning. So here still, you don't need to like ask them so much. You give them a chance to give out their views, like the process of actually looking for phenomenon. You focus all awareness and energy on the topic, abstract concentration and complete observation in the phenomenon. One can use a one researcher and compare in interpretation and analysis of the data. So here, what can we do? You can use the research and compare the interpretation and analyze the data you are doing. Continue. So here we are going in data analysis. As you are seeing these pictures, they are really showing you what they are doing, and then data analysis. It is a way of inspecting. It's a way of inspecting or transforming or modeling the data with the goal of discovering the use of information. So you can even see what they are doing right now. So you live with data, you cluster, categorize. You can even check on what the computer they are doing. They are putting it in the. They are putting even the pie charts, examine concepts and assumptions, define relationships between and among concepts. You can even check what they are doing, and they are using even a combined effort. We continue. Harold, we moved to. So here we are seeing the strengths of qualitative research designs. Reviews diverse and new understanding even from imaginal groups. Here you're allowed to use different groups, like for example, you can use Catholics, Muslims, Protestants, to make sure you gather the information you want. Still, it provides the rich description of social phenomena, provides deep understanding of causes that shapes lives. Still, it gives a chance to go into deeper, get information concerning those people. Enables researchers to gather data on difficult topics. Since we are giving the participants are given chance to express themselves, to give out their views. So it does not give the researcher a difficult time to gather topics or to gather the information. Data analysis
Excuse
is
me,
user
Jennifer.
involved.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
May you first check on the child? Try to position the child very well.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
not fine. But I can continue. She's not okay. So data analysis is user involved in data collection and knows its limitation. So as we've been saying, the data researcher is not supposed to intervene when the participants they are giving out their views. So they must know their limitations and give them a room to express themselves. Can induce and empower participants. Since the participants they are fully involved from the beginning, so they will even feel empowered, and they will even, I think, give out the full information and the right information to the researcher. Thank you. You can continue. So we are seeing the limitation of qualitative research designs. What hinders? One, more difficult to demonstrate rigor. What does rigor mean? Yeah, it means the way to establish the truth and the confidence in the finding of the research study. It also allows the researcher to establish the consistency in the methods used for over time. So it is It also often completed by a single individual. This research, when you're using qualitative method or approach, hello?
Okay, Jennifer. Jennifer,
Yes.
it's okay. Let me continue from there. One of the limitations of qualitative research designs, it is difficult to standardize. Hello, Jennifer.
It's okay, go ahead.
Jennifer.
It's okay, you can go
First
ahead.
attend to the child. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, so we said it is difficult to standardize interpretive categories with groups of researchers, and one of the limitations is findings cannot be generalized and therefore less often used to influence policies, that you are going to get information from them. And these are people you cannot really rely on developing a policy. That's one of the limitations of qualitative research. You cannot really only go with that on, with the qualitative. You need to do qualitative. Data sets are rarely made public, tested by others. Look at that information which was being stored in a video recordings or in audio recordings. You cannot get it easily. So that data sets always not made publicly to different, to the public or to an individuals who want to get
Peter, your network is disrupted.
about that. Let's go. The next slide.
Before I wanted to ask you a question, since this method is difficult to demonstrate, what will be the alternative? For example, in such a scenario where you need to get that data. And the other thing is that I'm seeing it not being used to influence policy. How can it be maybe researched better so that it can influence policy when it's not actually generalized, getting something that is more, could be individual, could be a certain group, could be a community, something of that sort, so that it can be influencing the policy. Over to you.
Yeah, when you look at that, in most cases, that's why we are learning different designs, so that which designs you can use suitable for something will be the one which you can use on or rely on. I think Mr. David will add more information on that, but as to good to know, we are supposed to get to know and also compare the quantitative as well as also the qualitative designs that we have been learning or we shall be learning about. So in summary, we said in qualitative research, researchers are closer to the fields or settings they are trying to research. It is highly contextual. So it needs you to come closer. It needs you to move to the person or to the area you want to research about so that you can get more information about that. And then also we say that qualitative research is not built upon a unified theory or methodological approach. Hence, it is variety and flexibility. As one of the things, the characteristics we have been saying, it is flexible. There's no way you can say, okay, this is what you're going to learn. You can agree as you reach a point of your studies, and then you can say, no, this one cannot work for us. Maybe we can use video recordings because there are a lot of noise. So in these qualitative researches, will always be flexible and it can vary from one point or from one research to another. In qualitative research, data analysis does not necessarily follow data gathering. Therefore, there can be a number of interactions between the two. So we are looking now, we cannot follow the data gatherings only because we have to use the two. That's what we are trying to look at, the data analysis. Then even though there are various schools of qualitative research that include grounded theory, methodology, narrative analysis, and also ethnography, they all have one element in common. Generally, an inductive approach, although deductions or prior questions cannot be ruled out. Because here we're saying now in qualitative research, we look at more of inductions or inductiveness. We don't look at the inductions more, so we have to involve. So that's also makes it one of the points in qualitative research. And when you're going to do it, though we said there are so many schools which handle that. Next slide. So we said the methods of collecting qualitative data include interview, transcripts, field notes from observations, photographs, video, and unobtrusive data. That's what we have been looking at in the videos which Jennifer has been discussing about. We say decisions on whether to attempt generalizations need to be built into the research design, paying a particular attention to sampling strategies. So we have to see what strategies are we going to use in other getting our samples. And lastly, we said qualitative process to achieving rigor include building trustworthiness, authenticity, credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. So that makes the research qualitative analysis really to have that rigor or to have that confidence. So we have to observe all those we are looking at. You're looking at the trust. Is it authentic? Is it credible? Can you transfer it? Is it dependable? And lastly, can you confirm the qualitative research design with all those information or data you have got? That makes the presentations of group 3. Over to you if there's any questions. We are ready, or we can share the ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and group 3 for the presentation. Any person having questions, you can raise them so they can be answered. Over to you.
This information may just be Lugambo, and you cannot base on Lugambo to make judgment. So in that case, it is a weaker kind of study, but very good in providing preliminary information that we can base on to do other further research. Okay, I was trying to rush because it is we are our time for lunch is fast spent, but we couldn't let these good ideas go, and I think that the team really did justice. And because of that, I think I will now go back to group 4. Group 4, you kind of got lost. That's why I had to interject along the way that you didn't focus so much, because the assignment was to look at the research designs. But when I looked at your work, you actually went to do what other groups were supposed to do, you know. So what I wanted you to come up with is to bring out the design, just focusing only on the designs, like how group 3 has done, looking at the quantitative and then bring out the different designs and how these designs are applied. But you got lost, so I had to interject you such that you don't make all of us lost. So because of that, I think that I will give you direction now, and then you go back on drawing board and you represent tomorrow. So what I expected to come out of you can take note 1. From the quantitative point of view, I want you to go and read about observational studies. Study designs. And in this case, you're going to talk about cross-sectional studies, cross-sectional case control studies, designs, cohort study designs, and ecological study designs. And then you're going to talk about the non-observational study designs. And you'll discuss about the randomized controlled trials. Randomized controlled trials, in brackets, experimental studies. And then you also look at the quasi-experimental studies, quasi-experimental study designs. So those are the 5 things, 6 things that I would want you to bring out clearly in your slides. Cross-sectional study design, case control study design, cohort study design, and ecological study design. And then randomized controlled trials, that's the experimental study design. And then the quasi-experimental study design. So we shall hear from you tomorrow. So meanwhile, we can go for lunch, and then we will let us come back at 3. It's almost 2 o'clock. So we'll come back at 3, and then we will start with group 5. That is going to take us through the research methods. And of course, they will take us through the quantitative research methods and the qualitative research methods. Please focus on only the research methods. Don't go to data collection, to sampling methods and what. We just want you to look at the research methods. So we hope that you're going to bring us quantitative research methods and then the qualitative research methods and their corresponding tools. Otherwise, if there is no other question or comment, we shall break off for lunch and then we come back at 3.